All right. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Life Church Parenting Podcast. I'm your moderator, Ryan Hanley, and I'm joined by our two hosts, Tony Ficus, who's been an elder in our church for nearly 40 years, more than 40 years.
Yeah, just a little less, actually.
A little less than 40. I'm aging him more than I should. Tony is a father to 3 children and a countless help to many others and many other parents as well. And then we have David Bost, who is also an elder in our church, and I won't try to age him by guessing, but he has been an elder probably about as long as I've been alive. And he is also our children's pastor and the principal of our school and father to 5 children. And again, a countless help to many others. And he listens to my parenting questions on a near daily basis, which I'm grateful for. David, do you want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this, where this idea came from?
Sure. This podcast is really to come back around a parents gathering that we just recently had. We ended up with over 69 questions that we couldn't answer in the time that we had. And we wanted to find a way to serve parents and help them by answering some of these questions a little bit at a time on a weekly basis, just to help equip and serve these parents.
Awesome. Tony, what would you want the parents of Life Church to get out of listening to this on a weekly basis?
Yeah, my hope would be that we see the value of doing it together and trying to learn from other people's experiences. Back when we started the church over 40 years ago and started the school over 35 years ago, the goal was to realize, we realized we individually as parents didn't have everything we needed. If we could cooperate together and work together and bring the things that we knew worked in our lives together and shared experiences, maybe we could have better outcomes. None of us are perfect, and still today that's the truth. We've learned some things over the years, and so this is another example of a way trying to envision parents in this day. I think that the things that parents deal with today in our culture and stuff around us has changed dramatically in terms of, so there's a lot of things to think about in terms of that, but I think we have a better chance to see our kids grow up to be godly sons and daughters if we work together and talk about these things.
That's awesome. I'm excited about this, and thank you guys for doing this too. I think this is going to be really cool. Obviously, we'll cover a lot of topics over the episodes that we'll do, because we're going to try to put one of these out a week for you guys to have. And you guys would, say this as well, that we're not going to perfectly cover every subject or cover every subject in depth, but the idea would be to take some of these pieces and give us some content to chew over, to bring into our home, to bring into each other's homes and work together on. And to that, Tony, you talked a little bit about this, and this came up about at the parenting conference a lot, this idea of parenting together. Obviously, you've been around for any amount of time in our church, that phrase will come up. Can you guys just talk a little bit about what that means? What does it mean when we say we want to parent together?
Well, I think it develops out of experience in some ways. And some of that experience was like, well, we learned some things not to do on the front end as we were trying to do it back many years ago. I think that we all learned a very important lesson is that we all have blind sides. I mean, we have blind spots in situations. And so I think early on, Patty and I, like with dealing with our children, it's like there were things that we thought were going well because children can act one way at home. And if it's just your set of eyes looking at them, and it's like they may be really different when they're out in another situation, we're around other kids or other parents in other homes and stuff. And so we learned that with one of our children, just like in terms of some behavioral situations and stuff. And then another parent saw some things that were disturbing about one of our boys, and it was like, did you know this about your child? It's like, yeah, we kind of seen a little bit of it, didn't realize that. And so it's like, thanks for the input, and it helped us to be able to correct some things that we didn't see. I think a lot of parents are obviously very positive about their children, that they're really doing well and wonderful and everything. It's like, yeah, maybe that's in your home sometimes, but maybe not every place else. So that was a start for some of these conversations, I think.
I would say that that's all very true. I'm just sitting here thinking of story after story. Even 15 minutes before this conversation, I had a parent pop in and sit down at my desk, and we started having this very dialogue, actually. And they left almost in tears because they wanted to be able to have people help them see their own blind spots with raising their kids and see their kids do well, and to see them linked together with other families and other parents raising their kids brought them great comfort to know I don't have to try to do it all by myself.
Yeah.
For me, I think this comes out of the value of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, where it talks about teaching our children as we're lying down, sitting down, rising up, walking along the way. That whole verse is set in the context of a community of people. When that was given to them, it wasn't just given to just the parents in the room. It was given to the whole community hearing that. And there is strength in us raising our kids together in the community called the church, where Ryan can help me with my kids, I can help him with his. And that actually even happens today. He's younger than I am, his kids are younger, and I can help him with his younger kids. But there are moments he helps me with my older kids. And that's where the church is the body, and we come together.
That's good. I'll throw one last thing in there also is that, we don't know what we don't know. When it comes to raising children, there are just like, who prepared us for that, right? What class did I take in college that tells me how to be a great parent or whatever? It's like, well, I don't remember any of those classes if they had them. And so we're learning along the way. You can make less mistakes by sharing your life with somebody else. Somebody who's farther along and has already raised kids past the age that yours are, they have some things to teach you. They have some resources to share with you. It's like, you might want to read this book, for instance, or listen to this podcast. It's like, it really helped us in our situation. We need that because we really don't know what we don't know, and what you don't know can hurt you when it comes to raising children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, obviously, when we talk a lot about discipleship also in our church, and we know that discipleship can't happen outside the context of the family. But when we look at our kids, right, we know that as parents, we have a responsibility to disciple our kids. But then I also read things like Philippians 2, where it says, consider others' needs as more important than your own. When we're looking at verses like that, how do you balance keeping the responsibility for discipling your kids, but also considering other people's needs above your own in the area of parenting as well?
That's good.
I think there is a balance that you have to have to doing that. But I think actually when you start caring for other people's kids in addition to your own, you actually find that's contagious. And they care for your kids. I can't count the number of people who have poured into my kids, and while I was pouring into someone else's kids. It works. Somehow it works. When it's in the church, it works back and forth. So
yeah, sometimes we talk about there's a ditch on both sides of this one. And one of them is I'm just being very independent, think I have it all. I'm going to raise my kids my way. And maybe I feel strongly about that, but I don't realize what I don't know once again. And it's like, and so I'm trying to do it all and not realizing the fact that I really need some other eyes on my children besides mine. So there's that independent ditch that you can fall into when you're trying that. And I think people are well-intentioned. I think we all really, I think Christians want to raise their kids where they turn out well and they love God and all those kinds of things. And so I think there's a desire for that, but the independent ditch will get you in one situation where you're not seeing everything, and then all of a sudden one day you realize, this is not the child I thought I was raising. Because sooner or later, they can't hide it forever. It'll come out. The other side of it is I just want to hand it all off. I really don't want the responsibility for this, or I'm sure glad everybody else wants to care for my child. And so I just get to sit back and not take the responsibility. And it's like, yeah, that's a bad ditch also. We can never delegate the responsibility that we have. So if I choose to let my child go to somebody else's house, I am choosing to do that. And it means as an adult, I know that that's a safe place, and that those parents have similar values to me that we have in our home also. And so I'm not delegating that to somebody else and saying, well, you get to raise my child. I'm finding people that have similar values where it's safe for my child to be there. And those parents will treat my child like we would treat them in all areas, watch out for things and give us feedback. And so, you don't want to be in either one of those ditches. And you don't want to, to me, it's like you should walk down the middle of the road and not see how close you can get to either ditch either, in terms of the handoff or totally independent. So, and there can be a little movement down the road on this one, but it's a process along the way, basically. So,
yeah, to that point of you don't always know what you don't know. This could be an area of blind spot for sure, where you're not sure which side of the ditch you fall on. So what would be one example or one sign that you're parenting too independently?
If you're not having conversations with other people about how you're parenting, I think you can find yourself there real quickly, because you can be of the mentality, oh, I got this. And having people's input helps you see those blind spots. If I'm not asking questions and I'm not talking to somebody about how I'm raising my kids, then, I mean, that's, to be honest, that's how, for my own life, that's how that started. Was I started asking questions and Tony started telling me, hey, have you thought about this? Oh, no, I didn't think about that. And so I missed it.
yeah, I think that along the same lines, when we had our children go to other people's houses, we would always have feedback on the back end. It's like, so how did Andrew behave? How did Nathan behave? How were they at in terms of, how do they act there? Because we expect them to be respectful to the parents that are there, and to if they need to be corrected, I want to know about that. And so that'll keep you out of the ditch of being independent. Is like you're setting your child up in situations that would be safe for them, and then you're asking for the feedback from those that you delegated authority to. Because we always did that. It's like when we told our children, we dropped them off. We told them, now when you're here, so and so, they are the parents in this situation. They're the adults, and we expect that you would respond to them just like you do to us. And they have full authority to handle situations when we're not here. So our children knew that, and the parents knew that, to make sure. And then we asked for feedback on when we picked them up, basically. So
it sounds like we as parents have the responsibility to invite people into our parenting process. That's how we avoid being too independent.
Yes.
We have to provide a place of invitation.
Yes.
Now, to the other side of that, what would be a sign that you're outsourcing, if we can use that term, outsourcing the discipleship of your child too much?
I think that one shows up in your relationship with the child pretty quickly. If I'm not paying attention to what's going on in their life, and I'm thinking that the school's going to help me do this, and the youth group's going to help me do this, and I'm not actively pursuing the questions like Tony was talking about, how'd they do here, how'd they do there. You can find yourself in just going, oh, it'll all be okay. It'll all work out. They're going to get it. And that's a dangerous place to be, because we, in the end, as parents, do have the responsibility to stand before the Lord for how we raised our kids. So,
yeah, I along the same line, I'm thinking that if you get too much in terms of this, passing it all off to everybody else, you may find yourself on a different page in your children at some point, where it's like they're being touched by God in chapel, for instance, and it's like having these God experiences and pulling closer to God, and they come home and you don't have a clue what they're doing, what's going on in terms of that situation, and maybe there's other things going on in your house that are not that way. So now they get confused in terms of, I thought we're supposed to be this way in terms of serving God, and it's like I come home, it doesn't seem like that's the atmosphere in our house, kind of stuff. And so you start to see parents and children grow apart in some ways in terms of that, and it gets confusing to the child, because they expect what goes on at the Christian school, the church school or chapel. This is how we're supposed to live. And if they don't see that at home, there's no conversation. That confuses a child and it causes problems.
So maybe to attach a practical scenario to this for both of you guys to answer, if you're a parent with maybe like an older child and you're in a situation where you've had several conversations about a behavior or a perspective, and it's just not seeming to get through, and you bring somebody else into the situation, at that point, do you think that's a healthy level of parenting together, or are you outsourcing, especially if the child is listening to that voice and maybe not yours in that situation?
Well, I think I've used that before. It's like, absolutely. When it's like, there's you can say something sometimes to your child like over and over and over again, and then they go out with Larry Smoyer, and it's like they come back and he has said the same thing, and and they come back like God from heaven spoke, and in terms of I've never heard this before, and it's like I'm just happy that the child heard it.
That's right.
I don't get offended over that. It's like this is wonderful. It's like however the child gets it. Sometimes we had situations where we didn't know what to do, and we just had to pray. We just prayed and prayed. Lord, you just need to change this. They change when they get saved. When they give their life to Jesus, this is a before and after child. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you're stuck in that time frame where they're not there yet, and God's working on their hearts. And it's like one day they it's like something happens and they give their life to Jesus, and it's like now you have something to work with. That's really different. But along the way with problems, sometimes you look for somebody who's another father, for instance, if it's a boy, for instance. It's like we would put our boys with certain other men, and it's like they would say they had similar values. They would say similar things, and our boys would hear it in a way that they didn't hear it from us. And it wasn't like we weren't trying. They just needed another voice.
Sometimes those other voices, we've used that in our own home as well. Sometimes those other voices say it with the same heart and same value. They use different words, and somehow those different words in that moment find their way in where the way I said it didn't, or it's dad saying it. It's mom and dad, they're saying it. And then all of a sudden, oh no, John Hanley says it. Oh, okay. I need to listen to that. I can't count the number of times one of my boys has come back to me and after he spent some time with Tony, and he looks at me and goes, "You were right. I should have listened." Well, it's because I had somebody else in his life that I knew I could trust, that I knew was on the same page, that spoke to him, but somehow he heard them differently, and the words he wrapped around it were different than mine, but it was the same heart.
So practically speaking with that, if you were a parent concerned about losing your voice with your child or having to do that, what were some of the ways that you guys came back around those conversations? For instance, if you sent them out with another father figure and it was this, like you're saying, David, the same answer, but different words, and it clicked. What were some of the ways you guys circled back around that without just being like, "Hey, told you so. Listen to me"? What were some of the ways you made sure to connect and keep your voice involved in that?
In my home, one of the things I did is I took my kids out for coffee, we went on a drive, and I just asked them, "Hey, tell me how the conversation went. Tell me what you talked about. How did it go?" And if they were at a spot to talk about it, they'd open up. Sometimes if they're not quite there yet, then because they're still processing it, even though they know that what they heard is the same, and sometimes it would take a day or two, and usually one of my kids I'd reach back out again later and say, "Hey, any other new thoughts after you had that conversation, after you spent time with them?" "Yeah, I've been thinking about what they said, and it really sounded a lot like you, Dad," or they would start talking about it. And you have to be careful, because you don't ever want to make them feel like, "Oh yeah, I was right."
Right.
That's not the heart. Right. We want them to get the thing. We don't want to prove our point. Yeah. And so sometimes I would let my kids just explain to me what they heard. And in the back of my head, I'm going, "You got it. You got it." But then I would pull on that and pull the conversation deeper. Okay, now you got that. Now what about this? What about this thought and this thought and this thought? So that I built on whatever John put in my kids, whatever Andrew put in my kids, whatever different people put into my kids. Then I built on that. So they were still hearing my voice, building on it.
That's good. Yeah, and I think, there's something about, I used to have this, in the business world, we used to call this the consultant syndrome, in terms of I could be proposing a certain project or something to upper management, and it's really, we need to go with this direction. And they would be like thinking, well, we're not really sure. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, well, what if I bring a consultant in, let's look at this situation and see what they do. So we'd pay a lot of dollars to bring in a really good person for consulting. They would look at the situation. They would write this wonderful report that says the same thing that I said. They'd go, yeah, we're going to do that. I didn't care in terms of, if they got it from the consultant and they couldn't hear it from me, that's okay.
Right.
I'm just after the result at the end. So if my child can hear it that way, I'm like David afterwards. I would just ask questions sometimes. It's like they come back and say, well, I was with so and so, and it's like, I really feel like I heard this, or God talked to me about this situation. I say, well, what does that mean to you? What's God saying to you? What does this mean about where you're at, or things like that? And just try to keep pulling on the thing that's got started, because a lot of times they unlock something, and you want to keep it unlocked. The best way I know to do that is just keep asking questions and keep kind of steering them toward God in terms of what does that mean? How has it got to change things, that relationships, or the way you do think about certain things, whatever. Because they may not think about those questions in terms of an output from that interaction. And as an adult, you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'm challenged by what I'm hearing, because it sounds like there's a lot of patience waiting for the child to be comfortable to talk about it. But then also it sounds like, as much as there needs to be strength in the relationship with your kids, I mean, if you don't have deep friendships with people you trust around you, it's probably hard to pull them into your parenting process in a way to trust like that. So probably something that's could be a whole nother podcast episode on its own, is the importance of our friendships in the midst of parenting. But
yeah.
Yes, definitely.
To that end, I'll be selfish and ask a question that'll benefit me, but I know there's people with kids my age. So I have 3-year-olds and I have a 1.5-year-old. What are some ways now I can start building habits and practices that set me up for when they are older and they do need more of the conceptual conversations from other moms and dads in the church? What are some things I could be doing now to set myself up in practice for that?
Man, my mind just fills with a lot of different things. Date your daughters, even when they're little, so they begin to feel that special relationship with you and want to talk and want to open up. I mean, there's things like doing devotionals, build the habits into your life of what you're going to do with them so that they get used to spending time with you, doing those things and having those conversations. Tony?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it's been a while since I had little ones like that. I have grandbabies now like this. In terms of building the relationship is always important. And your children and grandchildren like to be around you. They like for you to show them attention, in terms of those kinds of things. And so this is important. I think from the earliest ages, you're developing a place where the child feels they trust you. And I think trust is an important issue you build over time. And you do that by the way you love them and care for them. The way you discipline them even is a way of loving them also, in terms of how you handle that. You're building a relationship even by how you talk them through what they did that was not right, and why you have to correct that and things like that. And so a goal in that time frame is like, I want my child to know they can talk to me about anything.
That's right.
Because I wanted to keep that all the way through when they were in high school and they're in college. I want them to be able to come to me and it's like, man, Dad, I ran across this in college class today and this situation came up. And it's like, well, let's talk about that. And typically at that age, it's usually about midnight when they want to do that. And so I always tell people, it's like, when your child wants to talk to you, never say no, never close the door. It's like when they want to talk is when you want to talk, because it's like, this is a God moment. And it's in the God moments when they're open and they're asking questions that you have the most input into their life and can help them the most. Other times are like, those are really nice, but I would look back and say there's milestones in terms of time frames where I talking to our children, and it's just like sometimes they just like, it's late at night when they come knocking on the door and it's like, can we talk? And it's like, yes, we can talk. This is more important than sleep. God will pay me back for that. So
yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
One thing I would tell parents is be careful. Life can get busy. And you can think when your kids are small that it's not as important to have conversations or to stop and listen to them. And the way you do it when they're young is what they go to expect when they're older. And so if you don't take time for them and you don't do the one-on-one when they need to talk, or even when they're little. I mean, I can remember times that some of my kids would just want to curl up next to me, and I'd be busy working on my laptop and needing to get things done, but they wanted to show me their picture, their art. They wanted to tell me about their day. Even in those moments, you're actually building that trust that they're going to look back and say, well, no, Dad didn't have time for me then. He won't have time for me now. He won't want to have that conversation now. He won't think it's important. So, and that starts when they're little. They start developing that idea of what can I come to you with and what can't I? So be careful that you don't let the busyness of life rob you of something when your kids are young.
Yeah. So it seems like so much of this is just set up by, one, the relationship we can have with our kids, but to make sure we stay in the vein of this idea of parenting together. This will set up our next question, but I've been really blessed by, we've had more than one set of our friends here in the church recently start asking if our girls can just come over and hang out with their kids. And same vice versa. Like, hey, I loved that one of our sets of friends was comfortable enough to say, hey, can we just drop off our daughter so that she has some time to play and be around you guys and be comfortable with you guys. And I like that because it seems like the micro version of, okay, if I'm going to trust my kids to go out with this person or that person later, if they've grown up in their house, I think it, obviously so builds to that. But obviously from different life stages, there are points where the kid needs to be very dependent on you. But how long should parents stay closely involved before a child is ready for more independence? How do you see some of those signs as you go along?
Yeah, I would say, from experience, my experience has been along the lines of a podcast I listened to sometime in the past recently, where they're talking about when should you start exposing your child to more things in the world, for instance, things that are going out there, getting them ready to. At some point they'll be out there, right? They'll have to function on their own, kind of deal. And I think this is a real sensitive subject in many ways. I think that in the podcast they came down where I would in terms of when children are young, you have to build a safety situation. You're their protector. It's like a child's brain's not even fully developed till like 24. You really have to realize that. It's like, so they don't have all their thinking abilities and processing abilities till a lot later in life than we think sometimes. An 18-year-old is not fully mature in their brain yet, in their thinking patterns. And so when they're young, and the age can vary, it's like, so maybe they're 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, depending on the sensitivity of the child. There's no special cutoff in terms of that. You have to know your child, which is important once again. You should not be exposing them to too much in the world because they're not ready to process it yet. And having talks with them don't do a lot of good if they can't process that stuff yet. It may confuse them emotionally. It may mess them up in terms of, it's like it doesn't feel right or whatever else. So protection is the key on the front end of things. Mm-hmm. Then as they start to mature, and that's, you need to know your child, it's not a specific age, then you start to introduce subjects that they will run across, situations that they saw when they were out at the grocery store or some context, or when they went to sports over at the Y or whatever else, and they ran across this situation or heard that word or whatever, kind of thing. Like, what does this word mean, And so you start, there's an age where you start to have those conversations, and then that starts another process that will not stop. From that point on, it's like you're more and more getting them to understand the things that are going on in the world, and you're doing it at age-appropriate timing and a language they can understand. And so it's a slow process along the way. And I think parents who, if you're not careful with this is one I think where parents think their kids are way more mature than they are. They put them in situations, and then they can't process that, and it causes real problems, and it's difficult to undo that sometimes. So it's like people who think, well, my child's 7 years old, it's like I'm going to send him out there and he's going to be the Billy Graham evangelist. It's like, No, I think the things that are in the world are stronger than your 8-year-old, and probably that's going to backfire, you know. And so we should learn from that in terms of these situations, because then it's hard to undo some of those things that happen.
Sure.
David?
I think independence comes in like Tony talked about, in stages, but it's a process from the time they're little to the time they leave your home. And you just have to really watch where each child's at. Some of my kids were at different places at different ages, and I could put one kid in one set of circumstances and I couldn't put another child in that same place. And one of my kids, I needed to have hard conversations, very real conversations at an earlier age, because they started thinking and liking and wanting and doing at a younger age than my first two. My first two didn't have those kind of thoughts and didn't think that way. My last one was, okay, you're watching all your siblings now. You're watching all of this. So now we have to have different conversations, because even in our home dynamics are different. Not in a bad way, just that my kids would talk about things at school and my youngest one would hear, and it would cause questions. So she grew up a little bit differently, and we had to help her process different things. We also had to teach our kids, okay, part of your independence is that you don't have these conversations just anywhere. Come talk to mom and dad.
Yeah.
So there's a process there that it's not one size fits all, I would say, but you do have to be really careful. You can't, it's much easier to slowly expose your kids to things and slowly give them independence. It's much harder if you've given your kids too much independence to rein it back in.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be very costly to try to do that once you've done that. So
There's a great story in The Hiding Place. I don't know, you may have heard it. It's with Corey Timboom, and she's relating this story. I think she's in prison when she relates it or whatever, but she's talking about how when she was growing up, she was pretty young. I'm thinking 6, 7 or something like that, kind of years old. And she came home from school and she had heard a word, and it was the word. It's two separate words that got put together. One was called sex and one was called sin. And she was like, "Father, what is sex sin?" You know? And he looked at her, and he was a watchmaker, if you remember the story kind of stuff. And he was like, "Corey, would you go over there in the corner and pick up my watchmaking satchel?" Kind of deal. He had there's like a wooden case that had all this stuff in it, you know, kind of deal. This over there. And she went over there and tried to pick it up. She said, "Father, I can't pick it up." And so he looked at her and said, "Corey, in life, there are things that are too big for you to do yet. Like you can't pick that satchel up. Some things I just have to carry for you right now. But at another time, you'll be able to do that, and you'll be ready to hear that. So when it's time for you to be able to hear more about this, she says, right now, I just need to, you don't need to worry about that concept or those words. That's too big for you to carry right now. And when it's time, I will. When you can carry that, I'll talk to you about it then." And she was like, "Okay, thank you." You know, and that was good. That was a good enough answer for her. And I thought, that's a parent.
Yeah. Maybe we struggle with this sometimes because we undervalue how much preparation for independence really does, versus just throwing somebody in the deep end. Like everybody knows, obviously my dad is an evangelist through and through, so he wasn't going to let us skate on that one. So I remember when he would be down in the Devlin area when we were doing things down there. My dad didn't leave me down there to go walk around and do it by myself. That wasn't independence when I was a teenager, but he did make me walk house to house with him and be with him and watch him do that, watch him, how he interacted with those people. And it put something in me now that as an adult, I have in my independence. So sometimes maybe it's hard, but we have to trust that training for independence is going to do something. I think another one that we see all the time is sports. I think when I hear stories about how independence in that area has not gone well, it's when the parent's not involved. Whereas we have some parents right now, even in our church, who are being successful with being heavily involved and putting their kids in that situation while they're there. So I think training for independence can build the ability to be independent. Maybe just takes that trust to be able to get there.
That's good.
All right, this is one of our last questions here that got submitted. But is there a transition season where parental authority shifts from positional to relational influence? And if so, what does that look like?
I think as they're getting older, you're going to start feeling that. You're going to start bumping into it. When they're around 17, 18, sometimes it starts younger, and sometimes you have to help them through that, because while they may feel that change coming, they're not ready for that change to come. So they've got to learn how to still live under your authority. But as they get closer to that, you should be building all the way. This goes back to your independence and all of that. That's part of building for that transition from my ability to tell my kid, you have to do this, to, hey, this is a suggestion, here's a thought. But you should always be building a bridge, because you want, in that transition, you want to be able to have both. You want the positional when it's time, but you also want the influential when they are out of your home. I don't want to build in such a way that, great, I build independence into my kid, now they don't listen to me at all.
Right.
I want to have that influential side of that transition. It's very important, because your kids still need you. Tony talked about a few minutes ago, their brains aren't even fully formed until they're 25 for a guy. He's out of my house maybe at 18.
Right.
I want that influence to help continue to train them. But that's a thing that you build along the way. It doesn't just happen one day. There's not okay, you turned 17, now you're out, we switched here.
I think that when they come to you and they're asking questions as they get older, I think that you begin to feel, it's like, I would begin to not answer the question. I would begin to say, so what do you think? Have you prayed about this? And I'd let them try to give me their answer first, or they'd go pray about it and come back. And it's like, oh, that's a good answer. I think that's right. And so you're starting to switch where, rather than me be the authority, it's like they're listening. You go to God and see what God tells you to do. I'm starting to bridge the transitional gap, because that's where I want them to end up at.
Yeah.
Where they're an adult and they can hear God for themselves. Now, should they check that with somebody? Sure. And they've hopefully seen mom and dad do that. So there's an example already there, so it's not something new to them. They saw mom and dad reach out to other people when there was issues and things going on, and they got counsel. And so they realized this is part of how we should live life in terms of getting counsel. But I would stop making the decisions in that bridging time frame. And it's like, it's like, well, what do you think we should do? Have you prayed about this? And they would have to, okay, I'll pray about this. And you're moving them toward a direction where they can be, out on their own and hear God for themselves. But if you've done it right along the way, you'll find that, even my children now at the ages they're at with their own families, still contact dad, and it's like, well, they want to run decisions by me in terms of advice and stuff like that, because that's still where we're at. It's like that's should be normal, I would think, in terms of that. And so, but you've had to work that since they were really little, as David said earlier. Yeah. You built that to where this is a continuing relationship, in a trusted relationship, and what was once upon a time, this is how we do it. But I make the decision. They're making the decisions now, and just asking. It's like checking with people they trust. Their parents, starting with their parents, right?
Yeah. Well, guys, these have been really helpful answers. Obviously, as somebody who's grown up here, I've grown up with phrases like parenting together and being in this together so much, and it is such a core value of who we are as a church. And even in the idea of parents are primary in the responsibility of discipleship, and we answer to God for our kids, I think, obviously, from what I'm hearing you guys talk about, part of that is not just that means I'm the only one who does the discipling, but if I am primarily responsible for my kids' discipleship, it is on me to pull people in and avoid these ditches that we've talked about. So the way we want to try to end these is with a story. Because I like stories, and who doesn't? So if we were talking about that, those finding yourself in that ditch of maybe being too independent or sourcing it out too much, can you guys think of an example or a season in your life where you found yourself in one ditch or the other, and how did you get out of it?
Can I give a general thought on that before
Yeah.
David can think about a specific situation? But it's like, one of the reasons we started the school, a church school, was to help parents keep out of these two ditches.
Mm.
Because the school is not there to take over the responsibility from the parent.
Sure.
Sometimes people get that idea, and we have to come and talk about that. It's like, we are not the parents of your child. And so our mission statement and our vision that up there talk about, we're here to come alongside the parents, to work with the parents, in their discipleship process of their children. So what we're trying to do by that is that one in the church school is like, don't be independent. It's important, like having your children in the church school will help stop the independent side of it, because you're going to get feedback from teachers and people like that. And you may find out things about your child that you never saw before. That's a little Johnny after all, On the other side of it, it's like, but we're trying to show, but we're not taking over the responsibility of your parenting process. And so it's like you walk alongside us, walk alongside the teachers, being encouragement, come up here and work in the church, in the school, and things like that. Because it's one of the goals is to help parents stay out of those two ditches.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Which, if I could just, contribute to that thought, we just had this conversation with our high school class about how the school really works. And obviously the school is a structure and it's a mode for us to get to this idea. And I think one of the best descriptions I've heard, this was actually from a teaching that Dow Robinson did years ago, was the idea that an effective church school is where people and parents decide we want to raise our kids by the same values together. So we have a structure to do this. And so one of the things we were talking about with the kids is our school really works in a triangle. You have the idea of the students have to be engaged in it. The teachers and the administration needs to be engaged. But then there's that third part of the triangle of parents. And if the parents aren't engaging, not just with the kids and teachers, but with each other, the triangle of the school kind of falls apart. And so we need all these pieces of what we've been talking about to make that structure work. So I love that example here in the middle of this of avoiding those ditches. But David, have we given you enough time to think of a story?
Probably, I think for me, my first time would have been when I sat down with Tony one day and he started asking me a bunch of questions about my kids and how I was parenting, because I let him have that access into my life. And I realized, oh, I don't know as much as I thought I did. I need help.
An aha moment.
And honestly, after that realization of, oh, he's already done this. He's giving me good ideas. I didn't think of that. I didn't see that. I didn't realize that I needed to take my son away and do this with him and have these conversations. I think that for me was that aha moment that you just mentioned, but it was a place that I realized just how much you don't know you have blind spots because you don't know what you don't know, like Tony talked about, but that means you don't see the blind spots.
Yeah.
Because you don't know that they're there. You don't know that they're blind spots until somebody says something to you. And you can think, oh, I'm a great parent, I'm doing a great job, and I don't need anybody else. But the moment you realize, oh, I didn't see, you can find yourself in that ditch of doing it by yourself and being independent really fast. And that's where I found myself in that moment. And it wasn't intentional even. It wasn't like I was set out to be independent. I don't think a lot of parents necessarily start out trying to be independent. They're trying to do the best job they can parenting. And out of that, sometimes we can find ourselves over there because we don't want to make mistakes, or we don't want to let our kids be in the wrong places, in the wrong influences. So we're trying to do it perfectly. But that's actually all the more reason to have other people in your life.
Well, I know we've spent a lot of time on this, and this episode will be a little bit longer than probably the normal that we get into, because we'll have some rhythm, but we wanted to really take the time to cast vision for this. I know we spent most of our time probably talking about the ditch of independence, but I think that is the cultural background that we live in, is we are a society built to be independent. Therefore, as parents, that's what we're going to be facing the most. And I think if, as you're listening to this as parents, the practical step that I see from this is this week, invite somebody into your parenting and ask them what they see. Because so many of these stories that you guys have told, I think just comes down to, well, I was having a conversation or this person brought this up. And so my encouragement would be, as you're getting to the end of this, the simple practical step is sit down with a friend and invite them into your parenting. So guys, thank you so much for your time.
It's good.
Thanks for these answers. I found this personally to be really helpful, and I hope you guys all do as you're listening, and we will see you next week.